though, and all the officers who would normally be available to answer questions won't necessarily be available to do so. But if members do have questions in relation to the rolling action log and there isn't someone available to answer it, we'll be happily take a note of that and ensure that the reply is forwarded on.
Okay, is there any questions in relation to the rolling action log? No. Okay, we will then move into the business of today. We have a request by both groups for Thornhill Road Community Centre, but by way of a deputation. We are going to deviate a little bit from what would normally happen around a deputation, and we will invite, if people are content, both groups to come up together and say their piece. I will, however, go to Mr. Kettrick in the first place to give an overview of the report, and following that we'll then invite the deputations up.
Thank you, Convener. The purpose of the report is to provide an update in relation to Thornhill Community Centre following the Community Asset Transfer report that was considered by Executive on the 18th of June. The report specifically considers the request by the Executive for mediation to take place between the Rainbow Muslim Women's Group and Falkirk Thornhill Community Hall, who have both submitted asset transfer applications for the centre, and to explore the opportunity for collaboration between them. The report outlines the process that was gone through and highlights the conclusion of the mediator that it is unlikely that whilst further mediation could be considered, collaboration between the groups cannot be progressed. The basis of that is unknown for us. We simply have the summary of the conclusions from the mediator. It was undertaken in a confidential basis, with both groups being met with individually and then together by the mediator. And their report, the summary of it, is outlined within the report ahead of you today. On the basis that the main body of the report is to note the conclusion of that process and to recommend that in the absence of agreement from both groups to collaborate, as outlined by the mediator, that the Council, in line with its statutory requirements, has a deadline of the 16th of August in which to determine the application from the Rainbow Muslim Women's Group, and shortly thereafter by the application for the Falkirk Thornhill Community Hall Association, for them to then also be determined. So members are in effect asked today to consider both the covering report, which relates primarily to the mediation, and secondly to revisit the previous report that was presented in relation to the community asset transfer, which is a quasi-judicial report, and would highlight that part of the paperwork today is a quasi-judicial report, and I'll be happy to present that following the discussions on the main report that's ahead of you today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kettrick. Okay, first of all, are we content to hear both deputations? Yeah. Okay, can we? Oh, Billy Kerr, apologies.
Thanks, Convener. Quite happy to hear both deputations. However, a procedural question, as a quasi-judicial meeting, putting the two of them up at the same time, is that lawfully allowed?
Yes, and we've given some thought as to how best to create the fairest circumstance to allow both the applicants to have their opportunity to have their opportunity to state their case in their deputation, but importantly, to be available to answer members' questions at the same time. If you contrast it with the position in the planning committee, where you will often have an applicant and an objector who are in different circumstances. Here we have two applicants who are the same, effectively in the same position. So it will allow that opportunity. And when it comes to members' questions, it will allow both the deputations to respond to the questions at the same time. The other departure, I think, that's proposed to our normal procedure in this case is to give both the deputations the opportunity to briefly sum up after members' questions as well, primarily to pick up any issue which they want to address, which hasn't been picked up in any member's question. So it's to maximise the opportunity for them to be able to state their case and to maintain fairness.
Okay. On that basis, are we content to proceed? Councillor Redmond?
Just on the normally when deputations come forward, they get 10 minutes to speak, and that can work quite well when you maybe get a deputation that are kind of working together on the same page. But will both deputations get maybe 5 minutes each to speak? Will there be? It wouldn't be if one group maybe overspoke, it wouldn't minimise the other groups. Is that acceptable? Yeah.
10 minutes each is what, yeah. And we will be very strict around the 10 minutes of questions. Okay, right, in which case, can we invite the deputations to come forward? Okay. Okay, I think we have the Rainbow Women's Group first.
Good afternoon. Thank you for giving our Rainbow Muslim Women's Group opportunity to speak to the executive today. Since the decision you are making is very important, we have prepared a full statement which we would like to read today. We want to make sure that the executive fully understand the Rainbow Group position before making a final decision. We don't want to repeat every disagreement and allegation that has led to this meeting. Instead, we want to focus on the main questions that are important for the decision you are making today. Number one, what did we learn from the mediation? Did the mediation find alternative to the current recommendation? Which option is most likely to protect the long-term future of Thornhill Community Centre? Number four, which decision will be best for the community that the centre serves? Our group would like to thank Falkirk Council officers for their work during the CAT process. We also appreciate the executive decision to allow mediation before making the final decision. When the executive delayed its original decision to allow mediation, we fully respected that decision and took part in the mediation with a positive approach. We attended in a good faith. We were willing to see whether we could find a practical way to work together in the future. I will now pass on to Sophia to discuss mediation. Thank you.
Good afternoon. So our objective was simple. We wanted to understand whether a workable model could emerge that would genuinely serve the long-term interest of Thornhill Community Centre and the wider community. Throughout the mediation process, Rainbow Muslim Women Group sought to focus on the future rather than the past. We hope to explore practical questions related to governance, accountability, decision-making, financial responsibility, operational management, dispute resolution, and long-term sustainability. There are fundamental considerations which determine whether any partnership can be successful in practice. Unfortunately, the mediation did not progress to the point where these matters could be explored in sufficient detail. As a consequence, no comprehensive government framework emerged, no clearly defined allocation of responsibilities was identified, and no detailed operational model was developed that could be properly assessed by our trustees. The process, therefore, did not provide our group with confidence that a viable alternative arrangement existed which could reasonably be considered superior to the recommendation already before this executive. We make this observation not as a criticism of anyone involved, but simply as an honest assessment of the outcome. It is also important to recognise that mediation did not take place in isolation. Since October 2025, both organisations have operated within the same facility through licence and sub-licence arrangements. During that time, there have been multiple opportunities to explore practical collaboration and joint working. In that sense, mediation was not the beginning of the conversation. It was the latest opportunity within a much longer process to determine whether a mutually acceptable collaborative model could have been established. Regrettably, despite those opportunities, no workable arrangement emerged. We do not say this to attribute blame to any individual or organisation. We simply recognise the reality that despite sustained opportunities over a significant period of time, the parties have been unable to identify an arrangement that provides the clarity, governance, accountability and confidence required for the long-term stewardship of this important community asset. While collaboration is often a desirable objective, it must be built upon clarity, confidence, and a shared understanding of responsibilities. The opportunity provided to explore joint arrangements have unfortunately not resulted in such a model. In many respects, mediation therefore achieved one important outcome. It provided clarity. It demonstrated that no sufficiently developed alternative arrangement has emerged that would justify departing from the recommendation already before this executive. The executive is therefore returned to the position that existed before the deferral. The recommendation before you was not reached casually, nor was it the opinion of a single individual. It was a result of a formal assessment process in which competing applications were scrutinised, evaluated, assessed against the relevant criteria of experienced officers drawn from a range of professional disciplines. Professional officers considered the evidence and reached a recommendation that ownership of the asset should be transferred to Rainbow Muslim Women Group. That recommendation reflects professional judgment, collective expertise, and evidence-based assessment. Executive members are, of course, entitled to their own conclusions, but we respectfully submit that significant weight should be afforded to the findings of the Council's own assessment process. The central question before today's executive is therefore a straightforward one. What evidence has emerged since the recommendation was reached that justifies any different conclusion? Executive deferred its original decision to provide one opportunity for an alternative solution to emerge. That opportunity has now been provided, mediation taken place, and no viable alternative arrangement emerged. Accordingly, the officer recommendation remains the only fully assessed, fully evaluated, and evidence-based proposal before you. There is, however, one further consideration which we respectfully ask Executive to take into account. The process has now been ongoing for a considerable period of time, and the reality is that the uncertainty has come at a cost. The continued delay inevitably diverts time, energy, resources away from the community delivery and towards continued process. Long-term planning becomes difficult and opportunities postponed. Confidence among users, volunteers, partners, and stakeholders have been affected and continue to be affected. More importantly, the community has been left waiting. And the community now deserves certainty. The clear and decisive outcome will provide an unambiguous foundation with the future, which the future of Thornhill Community Centre can be built. It will allow detailed planning to proceed with confidence, and it will establish clear accountability and responsibility. It will provide reassurance to users, volunteers, and partner organisations. More importantly, it will unlock significant funding opportunities that depend upon long-term certainty and security. Those resources can be directed where they belong, improving facilities, expanding services, supporting local groups and developing tangible benefits for the people of Thornhill. Before concluding, we would ask Executive to reflect one final point. Rainbow Muslim Women Group is proud of its roots within Falkirk's ethnic minority Muslim community. We are equally proud to be part of the wider Falkirk community and to contribute alongside many others in the social, cultural and civic life of the area. Throughout this process, our vision has been one of openness, inclusion and service to all. We have never viewed Thornhill Community Centre as belonging to one section of the community. We view it as a community asset that should be welcoming, accessible and beneficial for everybody. The strength of Falkirk lies in the contribution made by people from every background, heritage and faith tradition. Community leadership can emerge from many places and many different experiences. What matters is not ethnicity, faith, familiarity or historical association, but what matters is capability, commitment, governance, sustainability and the ability to deliver positive outcomes for the local people. The community asset transfer process exists to ensure that decisions are reached on evidence, merit and community benefit. Following that process, officers recommend transfer to Rainbow Muslim Women Group. We respectfully submit that there is now an opportunity to demonstrate confidence in those principles and confidence in a positive future for Thornhill Community Centre. Rainbow Muslim Women Group do not seek ownership as an end in itself. We seek it as a means to securing investment, improving facilities and strengthening sustainability, increasing opportunities and delivering long-term benefits for the whole community. Accordingly, we respectfully invite Executive to bring this process to a conclusion, endorse the recommendation before it, and proceed with the transfer of the asset to Rainbow Muslim Women Group. Should Executive do so, we stand ready to move forward positively, constructively, and inclusively. We stand ready to work with all community groups, all centre users, and all stakeholders to ensure that Thornhill Community Centre becomes sustainable, thriving, and welcoming asset serving the entire community for many years to come. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for that. We'll move on now to Falkirk Thornhill Community Hall Group and just invite you to make your submission.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
You're a wee bit quiet if you could just go a wee bit closer to the microphone.
Is that any better?
Sorry.
It's on.
I can't really care.
Can people just identify who they are so we can relate to them, convener? Because I didn't know who the ladies' their names are. If I'm going to ask them a question, I just want to say, who are you?
Yeah, I think I've got Samina.
Samina.
And
Sophia.
Sophia.
Sorry, apology.
Okay, just whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Alice, Chair at FTCH, and this is Maria, our Secretary. Maria, our Secretary. Oh, can I? Okay.
You can bring the microphone towards you.
Is that better? Perfect. So thank you, convener, members of the executive. Thank you for hearing us today. On the 11th of August, just 2 days ago, we submitted detailed written evidence to Paul Ketterick. Paul confirmed he has reviewed it, but officers have advised that it would not be published today and that the key matters must instead be raised through this deputation. Under the community empowerment legislation, an asset transfer request must be agreed unless there are reasonable grounds for refusal and the benefits of competing proposals must be compared. So this is not simply 68 points against 62 in a strong category. The question is, what are the reasonable grounds for refusing our strong application? And what objective evidence demonstrates that sole transfer to the Rainbow Muslim Women's Group provides the greater benefit to the whole of Thornhill community? You deferred this decision on the 18th of June because collaboration needed to be tested. We took that seriously. We will not disclose anything said by the Rainbow Muslim Women's Group during the confidential joint mediation session. but what we can tell you is our position. In our private pre-mediation session on the 8th of July, we put forward a legally enforceable 50-50 model with equal decision-making, equal time, transparent finances, protection for existing users, and an independent dispute resolution. We subsequently authorised the substance of our own private session position to be disclosed to Falkirk Council. The mediator's report did record that no agreement was reached. The Council's covering report before you today goes further, stating that collaboration cannot be progressed. Yet, that same report also acknowledges that further mediation could potentially lead to collaboration. We can only speak from our position, but our proposal remains open. No agreement is not the same as no offer. Since the 1st of October, you have something from the original assessment did not have, and that is real-world operational evidence. First, governance. In February, the Rainbow Group issued an operational rules and code of conduct document, which was not contained within or agreed as part of the council-approved signed sub-licence. It characterised legitimate financial scrutiny and governance correspondence as vexatious conduct, with suspension of cooperation as the stated consequence. In effect, if we question invoices or operational decisions or governance matters, that would result in cooperation being suspended. The Rainbow Group told us that council officers had been engaged regarding that document. Paul Ketterick, however, has confirmed in writing that Falkirk Council did not contribute or have any input into its development. Second, finance. We have always accepted that we must pay our share of legitimate, properly evidenced costs. But this dispute has been unresolved since May. On the 15th and the 22nd of May, we raised detailed written queries about discrepancies, about missing supporting evidence, and about retrospective charges. Those substantive questions remain unanswered. Instead, we've been accused of material breach, threatened with debt collectors, and threatened with the Rainbow Group to contact the community groups about disputed bills. Some supporting documents have since been supplied, but the underlying queries still remain unresolved. Scrutiny is not obstruction. It is our duty as charity trustees. Then there is community impact. Before the FRI, the centre operated approximately on a 67% timetable occupancy. Under the temporary arrangement, the timetable was reduced to 31% in protected lets, as written into the signed sub-licence. Actual occupation of that protected let provision is now around 19%. 6 of the 12 established groups have gone. A number of affected groups have told us they would remain with or return under FTCH or under a properly governed collaborative arrangement. At least 2 of the remaining groups have told us they intend to leave if the RMWG receives permanent control. And we also have a new community provision interested in coming into the centre. Those departures have not happened in a vacuum. The reasons reported to us include uncertainty and unanticipated future costs. Users have reported feeling uneasy about being observed and monitored around sessions, and there have been several further interruptions during protected lets time. That is not simply reduced demand. It is a loss of established community provision during a temporary arrangement. And this is where the Council's response matters. Officers have told us that the FRI is operational and separate from the CAT assessment, and that this evidence is not material to the scoring. We understand that the 2 processes are distinct, but the equality assessment itself makes the operational experience relevant. The assessed Rainbow Group's EPIA repeatedly states that data on the numbers and protected characteristics of existing hall users was not available to them. Yet, it also states that all the existing lets will be honoured and nobody displaced. So where information about existing users was missing, the assessment relied materially on an assurance that their provision would continue. We now have real-world evidence against that the assurance can be tested. Protected occupation has fallen to around 19%, and 6 of 12 protected Let's groups have gone. If that evidence is treated as irrelevant, members are being asked to rely on the assurance without considering the experience capable of testing it. The Council's own original EPIA had already identified an evidence gap, recording only 6 consultation respondents and unknown or no comments received across most of the protected characteristics. Subsequently, we supplied a robust, building-specific evidence from 126 community responses and existing users. So our question is straightforward. Does the assurance that existing provision will be protected remain safe when tested against what has actually happened? Whether that changes an historic score is one question, but whether it matters to you today when deciding comparatively whole community benefit is another. Then there is the comparative scoring. Both applications, yes, were assessed as strong. Only 6 points separate them. We scored higher in performance management, saying we had a broader scope for performance management. Paul Ketrick has confirmed that commercial activity can support sustainability, but that it was felt. One application was more community focused, and that was reflected in the scoring. Professional judgment has a legitimate place, yes, but where it is the identifiable comparative evidence supporting that conclusion, when only 6 points separate 2 strong applications. Finally, we are not seeking to exclude the Rainbow Group. Before the FRI, we had offered the Rainbow Group 33% as a substantial anchor let. Our CAT model accommodates the Rainbow Group as part of that balanced whole community programme. So our primary request today is that you award it to the community asset transfer to FTCH. If members remain persuaded that collaboration offers the best future for the centre, we ask that the equal and legally enforceable model already outlined be pursued through whatever lawful mechanism is available. Members, what you have learned since June matters. No agreement is not the same as no offer. An assurance is not the same as protection. Professional judgment has a place, but it must be anchored to identifiable evidence. So before you vote, ask yourselves, if you refuse FTCH today, what are the reasonable evidence-based grounds for doing so? And where is the objective evidence that sole transfer to the Rainbow Group now provides the greater benefit to the whole of the Thornhill community? Please do not make a permanent decision on assumptions. When you now have evidence capable of testing them, decide on that evidence. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll now open it up for questions from members. Councillor Spears.
I'll try as much as possible to address the same questions to each particular group. I'll start with my last question. As the person that brought forward the go back, talk together, find out what the community thinks, was there any consultation or further consultation taken with the local community and group users?
I think press the button first. I'll go green, then no.
Following the mediation, we took that back to our committee. However, we were going in on the proviso that we had already discussed with the existing community, and they are all for the 50-50 approach, hence why we pushed for that in a big way.
The first one, the Rainbow Women's Group, it says the trustees, will there be a viable future if this doesn't go ahead? The trustees, You said that there was concern about the viable future.
of having a partnership.
Yes.
So, so what I'd said was that discussing a viable future here with the partnership, the trustees didn't have confidence that it could work.
Now, it seems to work at present. You have a joint control at present. And to me, that represents a broader base in the community, which is a local community centre. So there was no arrangements reached for any sort of joint control.
No.
I'm asking both sides. There was no arrangement made for joint control.
No what, sorry?
No arrangements. These didn't come to any agreement on an arrangement for joint control.
There was no agreement reached, but our offer stands.
I think the words that come out clear to me is that the community deserves constancy. Right? Can I ask you both, will both groups still use the centre if they are not successful? Right. By the way,
Is it working?
yes.
So some of the community groups, yes, they will.
Okay. I'm a great believer on the 50-50 group working. That's why we brought forward a go back and talk at the last meeting rather than come to a decision then. Now, I intend to put forward a motion today, which we have discussed with no groups, but I'll read the motion to see if it is legally competent. That council lets a local ballot take place regarding this matter to ensure that this is a community decision regarding the committee that will run and operate Thornhill Community Centre. It's very, very simple. I don't think people here really should be making a decision on behalf of their community. I think that community should have the right to make that decision.
Councillor Spears, this is a time for questions, so can we just...
Okay, I'm
please.
for questions. Thank you.
Yes. Okay.
I have an answer to one of the questions that were given to us.
Mm-hmm.
So Rainbow Muslim Women Group also did a survey as well, for which we had over 100 responses. And do you remember what it was in? There was support for multicultural, background and different activities happening in the centre, and there weren't any issues with the fact that and it was a survey that was put wide out, not just for one community, but for people who we have historically worked with from different community groups and people in the area. So more than 100 people had responded. More than 100 people. So we got a positive response, and any suggestions that they had given us as well. We're listening to our community about what they want as well.
You got a positive response, but it really has to be run independently, I think, to satisfy the views of the local community.
Councillor Spears, that's not a question. I'm afraid that. Is there any questions from any other members? Because I'm just very aware that we're moving on. Councillor Redmond.
Thanks. If either of your groups were successful, would any member of the community who have an interest in the centre, would they be able in some way to have involvement in the governance of the centre? Just anyone, or would it be maybe limited to their own groups?
Yes, the model we proposed looked at equal rights with independent governance where there were any issues to ensure impartiality and support throughout that governance model.
That was all my questions, and now thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Rainbow Ladies.
I'll just explain what the question was. I'll just explain what the question was. So there's a procedure for governance. We are welcome to work with all sorts of community groups, and we have in the past. When it comes to question of governance, and there is a procedure to do that. If someone wishes to join the committee, the board, they can join in the AGM and put themselves forward, because with that comes responsibility. It's not just about suggestions. When it comes to, and we have actually in the past brought in people's suggestions by asking the community what do they want to see. So it's more shaping what we do. That is open to the public to just come into the hall. We've had that already. Posters up, come and give us your views. What do you want us to do and see? And we act accordingly. But however, when it comes to governance, that comes with a lot of responsibility and procedure. So we take that very seriously. So when a third group wants to come and join us, they'll have to follow the set procedure as we are our organised and registered, OSCR registered group.
Can I interject? Likewise, we share the same view and value on that. Thank you.
Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Convener. Straightforward question, because we've had different versions here about what the assurances are. Can I ask both groups, please, to answer a very simple question? Well, two simple questions. One, what do you see as the community that you are serving? Are we talking geographical? Are we talking different particular groups? Can you define the community you see yourself as serving? I'll come to my second question after.
Rainbow Ladies.
Thank you. So when we talk about community, we talk about Falkirk wide. And we're talking about people from any and every background who live in Falkirk. In fact, we've actually worked with people from Stirling as well, Forth Valley area. We've had people coming in from Glasgow and Edinburgh to come and deliver for us as well. But people who want to use the space, it's for the Falkirk people.
Thank you.
Likewise, Falkirk wide, and also a lot of the groups, individuals do come from further afield. But beyond that, the community, it's not just about the geography, it's about the all-inclusive, the whole community, regardless of background and protected characteristics. There are over 180 individuals within the centre, for example, have disabilities, which is a huge part of the centre. It's a social inclusion hub for many as well. So to define the community we serve, it is looking at everything holistically, whether it's geography, whether it's protected characteristics, whether it's for support, whether it's for social inclusion, well-being, health, everything.
Okay, thank you. So it's essentially both groups see it as a Falkirk wide and to some extent further afield and all-inclusive.
Yes. Very much, yes.
Yeah. Okay. In terms of the existing user groups, will all existing lets, assuming that the groups follow appropriate procedures and the rules of the centre, will all the existing groups, irrespective of which group was to be awarded the community asset transfer, would both groups say that all existing groups would continue to have their lets maintained, and there would be no groups being asked to give up their let?
So 100%, we do not want any sort of interruption for service users and the groups that are using the hall.
All the existing lets have long-term arrangements in place already. That will be written in to any documents legally for the long term. Our concern is that under the temporary licensing arrangement, there's already been a number of operational issues that has led to a decline, and some of those user groups that are still in the centre are considering their position depending on the Rainbow Group successfully securing the centre or not.
That was not my question. My question was, as far as the governance of the organisations are concerned, would existing lets be sustained? Obviously, groups may make their own decisions depending on a lot of different factors, but if you can confirm that the existing lets would be honoured.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bailey Kerr.
Thanks. Can we start? A question. The FDCH group mentioned the amount of groups that started and down to 19%. Is that just taken from a time that this started until recently, or what was the time scale of that?
Groups left at different points during the temporary arrangement. Different operational matters have continued to evolve that along the timeline. We've only fairly recently been able to quantify that level of current occupation accurately, but we think it's important to obviously raise that today before any permanent decision is made.
Okay. Can I ask the Rainbow Muslim Women's Group same question? Are you aware of that data that's been given?
We weren't aware of it. No one was told. These groups are under the sub-license responsibility, not our groups that we sublet to. So yeah, we're not in reach of these groups as to why there was any issues or why they choose to leave. No communications happened. So I'm sorry, don't know.
Okay, so that kind of led me on to another question there then. So have you got different groups from the other group?
Yes.
And you take the bookings of your group?
Yes.
The groups that use it through use?
69%, isn't it?
Yes,
We've been allocated.
And is that the same as you? You have got different groups that go through use?
So under the temporary licence, we have protected lets of 31%. We are not in a position at the moment to allow new users to come in. The Rainbow Group currently deal with that.
So you're allowed to bring 31% of groups that come through you?
Under the temporary agreement.
Under the temporary.
Yeah.
Right, okay, thank you. Thank you both.
Okay. Councillor Murtagh.
I just want to clarify on that, because from what it, and whether this will maybe ask officers whether it's relevant or not in terms of decision making, but so that we can understand because of the questions that have been asked. In terms of each, at the moment in the operating model, each group has a percentage of lets, if you like, and you've said that that there's a decline within FDCH like protected lets from what you've seen. And what I want to ask from the Rainbow Muslim Women Group is that within your percentage that you're managing, is there a decline within your lets?
No.
So you're answering no to that. So within those that you're managing under your letting arrangement, there isn't a decline, and therefore you're saying you don't have necessarily contact with.
No, we have no contact with the groups that have been subletted with the other party. No.
Okay, right. I just wanted to clarify that that was the case. Thank you.
Can I interject? The just to clarify the point from Mina and Sophia, the point about not having any contact with the existing groups isn't accurate. The existing groups have the space solely to themselves when they have the let in and shouldn't be interrupted, and that's written into the sub-license agreement. At no point have we ever said you cannot talk to the groups. Of course, that's an exchange between anybody. Just want to clarify that point.
Okay,
Thank you.
and you've clarified that point, but I suppose just to clarify back with yourselves, in terms of the responsibility for managing those sublets and under your agreement, and you've seen a decline in those who, if you like, let with yourself, that but that's what I'm trying to kind of, you've given sort of reasons that you're not entirely sure why that is, but you've said as well that others will leave.
Because of the operational issues that we're having with the Rainbow Group.
So basically, the groups that we have are like the existing community before the ladies came on board. And the groups that they have are like the new groups that have come into play since they came in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I understand. And what I suppose that's the thing is that you're presenting that those groups that you have let to are leaving.
These groups have been here like at that community hall for years, and they're just extremely unhappy. And we've tried our best through, communicating with them and things like that, and trying to come up with solutions, and they've just been unhappy.
Yeah, I mean, I'll ask officers in terms of the relevance. Obviously, they're not here to speak for their reasons, so it's just important to clarify what the statistics were you were bringing up. Thank you.
I have Councillor Redmond in the room and then Councillor Bundy.
Just quickly, if you're obviously sharing the centre now, and you've got 31, so of the rest. So what happens if either of these are successful today? How would you see? You're both obviously heavily involved in the centre. So how would you see the relationship between your two groups progressing? Would the other group still be allowed to stay in the centre and kind of carry on with the activities they've been doing, or what's the kind of thought if going forward should either of these be successful?
So if we're successful, things would carry on as we would, being fully responsible for the governance and the running of the centre, and as is when the other party have bookings, they would be honoured. Everything that they're doing and their own engagement in the community and the people that they work with, all that will be honoured and just continue. Like I said, we don't want any interruption in service provision.
We have. Oh, are you finished?
No,
sorry.
I just want to go on the last question. When we took the lease and the FTCH got 31%, all the lets already is going there. They was dealing with it. Any new booking coming in, we are allowed to deal with them. And being told by the FTCH, we are not allowed to contact with their lets. It's been written. And we haven't contacted, some of the lets contact with us, or even we had an open meeting with everyone. We invited everyone in the meeting. People do ask questions, what's going to happen in the future? And we make sure with them, use all those, your spaces for you. We only arrange our program, where is the hall. Hall is free time. We fix our program, wherever we're doing extra booking or extra hour classes, only in the free time. The time they've been given to them, that's 100% is theirs. We're not going to take from them. They're not going to move.
Thank you. So from prior to the FRI licence being granted, we had offered the Rainbow Ladies 33% at that time. Obviously things materialised and the ladies ended up taking the FRI licence, and as a consequence of that, our timetable reduced as a protected timetable to 31%. However, all throughout our CAT application, all through mediation, all through this process, we have maintained that we are willing to work with the Rainbow Ladies at all times, in whatever way that looks. If we were to secure it, our offer still stands of an anchor let, and the percentage, the usage can be worked out.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Redmond and Councillor Bundy.
Thank you, convener. The question that I have is for both groups, and it is, I hear from the both of you that you were willing to have some sort of agreement, but that's not been reached. So from your own perspective, what is the barrier to an agreement being reached for the running of the centre?
So we've already discussed this, and we've already had the mediation process, and given what's been happening since October, our trustees don't, well, we don't have the evidence to believe that an agreement can actually be enactable and followed through. And however, we still want to engage positively with FTCH and community groups there. But that's really not why we're here today, as to why it didn't work. I think we've already had that discussion and discussed it as much as we could.
From our perspective, likewise, as Sophia said, that we've had the mediation. However, regardless of the outcome of the mediation, our offer still stands, and we're still willing to look at that collaborative model under a 50-50 equal share, equal everything going forward, because it's a whole inclusive community that we're looking at, not one group versus another. So we have to come together and make it work.
Thank you for those answers. I just want to clarify the understanding. It was the position of the trustees of the Rainbow Group that a joint agreement couldn't work.
Correct.
Yeah, thank you. That's me, convener.
Okay, thank you. If there are no more questions from members, I'll go to each of the groups just to sum up briefly.
Yeah. Just want to thank you for the opportunity for listening to us one last time. And it's unfortunate that an agreement wasn't able to be materialised between the two groups, but we do hope it's an opportunity for us to just move forward with certainty that we want strong leadership, and the community deserves clarity and deserves an opportunity for us to grow together. Given that we are a group from an ethnic minority background, we absolutely do understand equalities and we understand inclusion, and we bring our lived experience to harness this atmosphere and ethos of inclusion in our community here. And this is just an opportunity for us to just open up new services and new activities in Falkirk, really. We just look forward to hearing your decision.
Okay, thank you for that. Thornhill Community Hall.
Okay. The mediator's report, as we've spoke about, has recorded that no agreement was reached. The council's covering report goes further to say that collaboration can't be progressed, but the same report acknowledges that further mediation could lead to that collaboration. We can only speak from our own position, but we are about the whole community, and that includes all protected characteristics, not just a chosen few. Our equal and legally enforceable proposal remains open today. There are already groups gone, as we've said, but it's about how we build that going forward, protecting that established whole community provision that existed when the process began and building it for the future. So if the councillors are relying on assurance, let's look to real world evidence and capable of testing. It can't be treated as irrelevant. Whatever decision you do make, it is a permanent decision. So please, all we're asking is to decide on the evidence presented today.
Okay, thank you for that. Just a very brief reminder that within the recommendations, number 5, notes in line with statutory requirements, Falkirk Council is required to issue a decision notice to an applicant within 6 months of the date of the validation of the application, which in the case of the Rainbow Muslim Women's Group application means by the 16th of August. Now, that is not to say that that is fixed. That could be extended if that was the feeling of the executive with the consent of the two groups that are here today. So I just ask if people could give that a little bit consideration and to whether or not there is likelihood of being able to reach that consensus going forward. So on that, I am going to just break for a recess and we'll maybe give people the opportunity to have a think about it. Okay.
Oh no, that's fine. Don't worry about it.
Okay, colleagues, I'll go to Mr. Kettrick to give his overview of the report and any pertinent comments in relation to the deputations.
Thank you, Convener. As highlighted within the report, Special Executive is asked to note that following the external mediation, collaboration between both groups cannot be progressed. And we've heard similarly today from both depositions that they've been unable to reach agreement on a model for forward in a joint management approach. In line with the statutory requirements, Falkirk Council is required to issue a decision notice unless there is a decision which is mutually agreed by either or both groups to extend the dates. The RMWG application requires to be considered by the 16th of August, and the FTCH application requires to be determined by the 2nd of September. Members should note that these are quasi-judicial decisions that have been undertaken, and based on the current position that mediation has been unsuccessful, then the original report that was presented is now to be considered by elected members. And that executive report, which was previously presented, states to note the two interests, as we're well aware, note the evaluation process and the outcome of that assessment, agrees to the full ownership and community asset transfer of Thornhill Community Centre to Rainbow Muslim Women's Group at the proposed purchase price of £1 for full ownership of the land requested, reflecting the benefits that will derive from the project. Executive is then asked to agree that the Director of Police Services is authorised to prepare and issue a decision notice to progress the transfer to the RMWG, subject to the conclusion of any review or appeal process that may occur. Agrees that the Director of Police Services is authorised to prepare that decision notice, rejecting the asset transfer application of FTCH. It further seeks to agree that the Director of Police Services is authorised to prepare and include a condition in the decision notice to RMWG allowing for the Council the option to reacquire the property in line with the circumstances outlined within the report at paragraph 7.19. We also seek to agree that any transfer is subject to any existing burdens or restrictions in the Council's title. In addition, the report seeks approval for the Council's enablement fund to support capital improvements to the facility, subject to the further assessment set out in 5.47 to the sum of up to £101,738 to the Rainbow Muslim Women's Group. That would occur as part of the transfer arrangements, should they occur. Notes that the assessments undertaken confirm the proposals are in line with the Council's statutory obligations in terms of both the Community Empowerment Scotland Act 2015, the Asset Transfer Request Procedure Scotland Regulations 2016, and the Disposal of Land by Local Authorities Scotland Regulations 2010. And further, the final recommendation of the report is to instruct and authorise the Director of Police Services to agree and conclude all necessary legal arrangements to progress the disposal in accordance with Part 5 of the Community Empowerment Act, Community Empowerment Scotland Act 2015. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Kettrick. Are there any questions to Mr. Kettrick? Okay, Councillor Murtagh.
Thanks, Convener. And I'm not sure if it is Mr. Kettrick or it might be supplement with Mr. Moody. In effect, we've been set out in the report that we have to make a decision by the 16th of August in order to comply with the date that's set out from the original application by the Rainbow Muslim Women Groups. Apologies. And I think, Convener, you said previously about the possibility that if there was agreement, for example, on extending that by by both parties, that could potentially go on. But what we've heard is that, I suppose the question is that from a legal perspective a viable possibility, given I'm just reading through the constitution of the groups and whether they'd be authorised to make such a decision, given the timeframes are only a couple of days. It doesn't look to me like they would be as a board, given what they've got to put before their members to make such a decision if it's a decision of trustees. But would that have any practical effect, given you've said in the report that you don't believe that collaboration, an outcome of collaboration is possible? What is your view on what the obstacles are and whether there is any viable alternative there?
Convener, the view in relation to the mediation and a potential collaboration was the view of the independent mediator who was appointed, and they undertook the discussions with both groups. Officers concur with that whilst further mediation could concur, it's unlikely to result in a future collaboration. In terms of the non-determination of the application or the seeking of an extension, firstly, the Rainbow Muslim Women's Group, because they are the first date to expire, would need to consent, as would Falkirk Thornhill Community Hall. They would need to consent to that extension also. The purpose of the extension would need to be pretty clear as to what we were seeking to achieve by that extension, whether it was further mediation, whether it was further engagement on a potential collaboration model, both of which are within this committee's gift to seek that consent of both groups. And I would confer to the governance manager, the head of governance, to advise on the process for that.
Yes, thank you, Convener. And Mr. Kettrick is correct in saying that it is open for the period to be extended, but that's by agreement between the authority and the community transfer body. So in terms of the authority's part in that agreement, if this executive was so minded, that would be our part of the agreement. In relation to the community transfer body's agreement, I think the point Councillor Murtagh makes is, are the representatives here today authorised to make that agreement? I think that's an issue for them as to whether they have that authority or not. I don't know, as a matter of fact, whether that is the case or not. And if both representatives consider that they do have authority, I don't think it's for us to look behind that in the question of reaching the agreement. But we're not at that stage yet. I think no one has suggested an extension yet, and it hasn't been explored with the representatives, far less the issue of whether they have the authority to do so.
It's just from a quasi-judicial point of view, before kind of going into other questioning, want to be clear that if, for example, this executive, as you say, it would be, if we made a decision to say we would like an extension or to seek an extension, that we could make that decision, but it might be that the groups then, even whatever said in this room, could go back and say, well, that's not what we agree as a group, and therefore what legal position would that leave us in, given that our determination deadline is the 16th?
The decision would become there would be a non-determination in relation to the process. Mm-hmm. The effect of a non-determination would be to entitle the group whose application has not been determined to seek a review. Okay. And that would be essentially to move the decision making from this body to the community asset transfer review body. Okay. So that's the outcome.
I just wanted to get that clear before pursuing any other questions in terms of what the risks are from that point of view. Thanks. I might have other questions if that's all right, but I just wanted to clarify on that.
Okay, Bailey Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. This is a question for Mr. Kettrick. Why did the Council recommend one of the groups? I would have been more content having the 6.8 and the 6.2 in the committee, and I know the committee's got to decide finally. However, if I'm one of the groups and I'm getting recommended by the council, why would I agree to hear a joint venture with the other group? So I'm just asking why we had a certain group as a recommendation.
Convener, and it's a good point raised by Bailey Kerr. The requirements of the legislation are is that we have to evaluate both asset transfers on the basis of their merits, their benefits, their disbenefits. The guidelines that goes along with the Act always seeks a way you have two applications, you have to encourage them to work together. The licence arrangement that was put in place not only kept the building open, it provided the opportunity for them to work together. And they have worked together over that period. The building's still open, community groups are still using it. However, going forward, as we had the deferment last meeting, was to see could a joint management arrangement be identified and be taken forward, and that unfortunately has not come to fruition, and therefore we still continue to require that in terms of the guidance and in terms of the legislation, we have to determine the applications on the basis of their merits. So one needs to be approved and one needs to be rejected in the absence of another alternative application which could be made by either or both with a joint management model. But ultimately, because we have two applications, we have to make that determination as to which one officers would recommend.
Thanks for that. I just feel that at the end of this, there's one of the groups going to be very, very unhappy, and I don't know if that's for the benefit of the full community at large. As I say, if I'm the group that's got the highest score and getting recommended by the council, I'm just sitting back and going, fine, I'll take my chances with that. But thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Bailey Kerr. Councillor Hannah.
Sorry, I had put my light off because some of the issues I was going to ask about had been covered.
Okay. Councillor Bundy.
Thank you, Convener. And it is on the back of Bailey Kerr's question, and it's in regard to the mediation. I know it's been, and I know that the contents of it aren't going to be made public. But why was that decision made for it not to be public when, in theory, there was an incentive for one of the groups to collapse the talks? I'm not saying that was the motivation, I'm just saying in theory that is certainly something in play.
Convener, it's a good point made by Councillor Bundy. The terms of the engagement provided by the mediator was that the best outcomes are done where there is those confidentiality between the groups, and that's to protect the interests of both parties. In terms of those confidential discussions, both groups then come together, and both groups had to consent to the report that was provided to ourselves on that confidential basis. So ultimately, the reasoning and the rationale for it being confidential was actually out with the council's hands, in that was the terms of the appointment for the mediator.
Thank you for that, Paul. If it was decided by the executive for further mediation, could the executive put in that the contents of it could be made public, or would that be out with the control of the council?
Convener, the short answer is the council could seek to make an appointment on that basis. The requirement would then need to be that we could get the consent of both groups participating in that on a non-confidential basis, but also to seek a mediator who would be willing to undertake it on that basis. That may be something that's challenging, but I couldn't say definitely no. We would need to go and test the market for that.
Thanks, Paul.
Councillor Spears?
Is it within the gift or the power of this council, this executive committee, to then say we decide that we use both on a 50-50 basis, continue to manage this hall? We've had further mediation. I mean, we could mediate, I think, on this for the next year. The decision has come to us. Should we make the decision on a 50-50 basis, these both run the hall?
Convener, I would need to consult with legal colleagues. However, we do not have an application presented to us by either group on the basis of a 50-50 management basis. That would require basically a new application to be made on that basis to go through the statutory process.
And just to say, Convener, I agree with the answer made by Mr. Kettrick. That's not the application that's before us just now. You have competing applications for the full acquisition of the property, not 50-50 applications. So that's not an option that's available to you as an executive.
Put that determination forward to both groups, and I would imagine they would then put applications forward. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, did one group say they were willing to do that and the other group said they weren't?
Convener, from the deputations, I think that is what was presented earlier, but it would be for both groups to confirm or not confirm that position. It wouldn't be for me to speculate who was agreeing to what and what terms or what basis, because it's not the applications that are before us.
I'm sure it's a decision of Solomon here. You know, you can't cut the child in half and give one half to each other. But there is a solution, the 50-50 solution. Thank you.
Okay, I've got Councillor Redmond.
Thank you. I was just wondering if it's obviously different to a few of the applications that have came forward before, but is there any scope for sort of conditions to be placed when granting a community asset transfer? For example, could it be conditioned that, I'm sure both groups said that they would work together going forward, but could it be conditioned that certain lets would be honoured? Also, there's a mural on the side at the Battle of Falkirk mural. Could it be conditioned that that has to be retained within the asset transfer?
Convener, it's one where I would ask the support of our legal colleagues. Short answer is yes, conditions can be applied under the Title Conditions Act, but however, they are fairly restricted in what they can be. One of them is a conservation burden, which could preserve that mural, and certainly its conditions. It's not, I understand, listed, so the conservation burden would need to be pretty clear as to how we've done that. And as members will maybe recollect from the discussion on the borough halls, there was conditions applied to that disposal to preserve the heritage items that we identified. So something similar could be done on that, but in terms of other conditions, they would be more challenging, and I would ask the legal services manager or the head of governance to respond on that.
Again, I would broadly concur with that answer in the sense that, yes, in broad terms, conditions can be attached to the agreement to the asset transfer, but they have to be proportionate and they have to be consistent with the ownership that's granted. And I think it's important to have in mind that where an asset transfer is agreed with conditions, the conditions themselves can form the basis of a request for review and then appealed if they're not consistent and proportionate with the ownership that's granted.
Thank you. My next question was on the mediation. You were kind of speaking about a mediator. So how do you find a mediator, and who pays for the mediator? Is it a cost to the council or the groups?
So following the decision by elected members to seek the mediation, colleagues approached the Scottish Mediation Service to identify mediators who A, had the capacity to do it in the very short timescales, and B, had the experience of dealing with community groups. The cost of that is picked up by the council on this occasion, and therefore we were happy to do that. And as I pointed out earlier, the basis of the mediation appointment by the mediator that came forward was on the basis that it would be done on a confidential basis, because their experience from dealing with community groups is that they could be a lot more open and a lot more transparent in their discussions as part of that mediation process.
Thank you.
Councillor Hannah?
Thank you, Convener. Can I just have some clarification here, because we've talked a lot about this most recent mediation, but my understanding from the original report and from all I have heard is that officers had been working from a much earlier stage to try and get the two groups to work together. Could you tell me, please, when did the officers begin to work with the two groups to try and get them to work together and come up with a common approach here? How long has this been going on, I suppose, is the question.
Convener, I couldn't be specific on actual dates, but since October last year, both groups have been operating under a licence agreement, a head licence to the Rainbow Muslim Women's Group from us, and a sub-licence to the FTCH from RMWG. During that period, there has been informal mediation undertaken by colleagues where issues have arisen to try and to seek that collaborative management, and the intention was always is that by putting groups together in that scenario of being in the building and working together, that you would hope to seek that more collaborative approach to management and potentially get a joint application. And unfortunately, in the circumstances, that hasn't occurred, and therefore we've ended up with two applications.
So in effect, it has been going on since October last year. Yes. Okay, thank you. And my other question is, what would be the consequences of us saying, well, we're not going to give this community asset transfer to either group? Thinking of moving on from Councillor Spears's mention of Solomon.
Convener, the Community Empowerment Act is a presumption for approval. It's very much written in the positive that the council should always seek to approve unless it has reasonable grounds to not approve an application. In this instance, we have two very good applications that have been made. We've always recognised that it is within the authority's decision-making process to decide on neither, to reject both, and the decision notices would need to reflect on that, and it would then be for either or both group to consider whether or not they wish to review. And I would ask again the head of legal and the head of governance to reiterate that. And it would be a very unusual circumstance where two applications, an unusual circumstance having two applications, two very good ones, but it would be an unusual circumstance to reject both.
Thank you, Convener. And again, to concur with Mr. Kettrick's points, and the Act is fairly clear on this point, is the authority must agree to the request unless there are reasonable grounds for refusing it. So there is a presumption of a grant there, and if any member were minded that both should be refused, they should be clear on the reasons for that refusal. And I think Mr. Kettrick is correct as well in saying that the consequences would be that both would be capable of being reviewed, and then depending on the outcome of that review, to be appealed beyond that.
Thank you. And just finally, do we have any examples from other authorities of a similar situation arising? Do we have any examples of refusals of community asset transfers, or where there are two groups that we can learn from?
Convener, the short answer is no. There is no comparable circumstances where you have two really good applications coming forward. Where there has been two groups that have come forward to progress asset transfers, the other authorities have been fortunate enough that they've then either one's taken the lead and worked with the other, they've merged, or either have fallen by the wayside because they don't have the same level of support perhaps that we have given. I've been to the heads of property service. Nobody's aware of having the same circumstance that we have, so we're pretty unique, and people are looking at how we have determined this. It's not uncommon for one application to be rejected for whatever basis that may be, and therefore the same review appeal process applies, but we have the unique scenario where we have two very good applications, and unfortunately we have to make the determination on them.
Thank you, convener.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Colley.
Yeah, still good. I suppose I just wanted to, I suppose what we are talking about as an alternative is what has been put forward today, was that there should be 50-50 ownership, not 50-50 management. And I just wanted to check, because at the moment we've got a kind of part split, part kind of partial management where there's a sharing of management of the facility, but the CAT is for ownership, it's not for management. And I just, because I think that we're conflating the two things. We are actually talking about management here and ownership, and not the obligations that go with owning the building. In effect, it might be management, but that's not actually what a CAT is.
Convener, I think there would need to be clarity as to what exactly is being proposed, ownership or management. Both scenarios come with different obligations, different requirements, particularly in relation to the disposition and the disposal aspects and the responsibilities on the parties. Is it shared and mutual obligations and or pro indiviso shares of ownership and things like that? But I'll go back to the previous response. We don't have an application in front of us, which is 50-50. We have two applications, both of which are seeking ownership of the building.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, I think the thing about the 50-50 ownership kind of came today, but I'm just also, what are the, I guess, the risks, and that kind of the risks of it are kind of sitting with me. The risks of, if there was no determination, obviously we're in a kind of letting license type situation just now, and I suppose the risks of not making the decision in terms of sustainability and access to funding for the building. And I know that there was, I know from all the CATs in other areas that's been able to release significant levels of funding, including from the council. And I guess what I'm just trying to kind of understand a bit the risks of ongoing delay in terms of the sustainability of this centre as a whole, whether that's within whomever is leading or not leading in terms of a letting or licence.
Convener, it's a good point raised by Councillor Colley. The access to funding is very much based on long leases and ownership. That is what the majority of funders require, and indeed our own enablement fund is upon conclusion of the asset transfer. No matter what the decision is today, the current arrangements from a council perspective, we're happy to leave that licence agreement in place, because the whole principle of it was to secure future community use rather than close the building, which, as we know, has happened in other instances where we haven't had a willing licensee willing to take it on. So from that point of view, we'd still be looking at continuity, but you're absolutely correct that it does bring its challenges in terms of securing long-term funding and also certainty for the lets. We've heard some of the lets have maybe moved on because there is that uncertainty, and we've seen that in other asset transfers, but then we've seen a really good recovery when there is then certainty on directions of travel. And, you know, I think as I've reported previously in the SPR updates, every building that is transferred has actually seen an increase in utilisation. They've secured extra funding, including from third-party sources, and we've seen the modernisation of the community facilities happening because there has been certainty. I think in this one we're in that kind of limbo position that until we get there, we're not going to see those benefits.
Okay. Councillor Bundy.
Thank you, convener. I'm going back to the 50-50 idea that has been floated around, and one of the deputations stated that they have put forward a proposal. It would be interesting if the council have reviewed that and what their thoughts on that were, if they think that is workable.
Convener, as noted in the deputation, that was addressed to me on the 11th of August. I've reviewed it and been through it, and the primary principle is it requires both parties to agree to work towards that model. It was raised, we understand, and it's stated in the further information that was provided to us, that it was raised as part of the mediation. However, the outcome of the mediator continued to be that whilst further mediation could be considered, their view is that it would unlikely lead to a collaborative model. So whilst we've seen it, we're aware of it, it needs further consideration in terms of the detail, particularly in terms of is it ownership, is it management, and all of the issues that come with that. It would be too early for us to say whether or not that could be workable or not. But ultimately, in terms of the statutory process or the quasi-statutory process ahead of us today, is we have two applications, neither of which involve that model.
I ask it because it is pretty critical for where we go from here. And because if it is a prospect of this working, in theory, then future mediation to see if we can get to an agreement, I think could be the right approach. But if the obstacle is that one of the parties are just not interested in it, then further mediation it is not worth the cost that will come to the council. So from the limited information that you have, Paul, is it a feasible proposal if both groups are willing to try and iron out the issues and the details?
Convener, nothing like put me on the spot. The short answer is anything's possible if you have two willing parties willing to progress on that basis. And as I mentioned, it was outlined as part of the mediation process, perhaps not in a high level of detail. And again, I'm in receipt of the proposal, but again, maybe not in the full detail that would need to be worked through. Anything is possible if you can get both parties willing to do that. But I would go back to the mediator's assessment, who was obviously involved a lot more in those discussions, that they did not feel that whilst further mediation could be progressed, it would not necessarily mean that a collaborative arrangement could be put in place. But ultimately, it would come down to the views of both the groups.
Thanks, Paul.
Okay, Councillor Deacon.
Thanks very much. It says on page 14 that the cost of the mediator was 3,150. Is that the standard price, or the prices for further more often, more usage alter? Would that be the price if further mediation is required for each attempt?
So, Convener, and Councillor Deacon's highlighted the cost there for that mediation. That was for the initial mediation that's been undertaken. Any further mediation would come at an additional cost. In terms of the cost, we've done some market analysis, and that is in line with what we would expect to pay for a mediation process of that nature.
Okay, I have Councillor Murtagh.
Thanks, Convener. I wanted to ask, I mean, it was asked earlier whether there was any other examples of other councils where we'd had similar situations, and there was not. But you also mentioned about other groups. I mean, SPR has been a very long process and remarkably successful one. In the examples where, there's been 2, maybe even 3 groups that have come forward for a facility, and then it's one group who's progressed forward. Can you say anything about those sorts of processes where perhaps it just wasn't compatible for both to proceed and one ended up taking the lead?
Convener, we've actually had that on quite a few occasions, particularly with management committees where there is other groups and quite prominent groups that are there. And ultimately, they all tend to circle round one group, the ones that are willing to step forward and go through the asset transfer process. I mean, one that jumps to mind is Lauriston Hall, where Thrums ladies then came forward and said, we'll take it on, but we actually had other interests from other groups who were interested in it, and they've all then come together and have worked through that. But there is ultimately only one community asset transfer body that's taken it. Other groups have come together and formed a management committee and then progressed it forward in that. So it's not uncommon to see groups coming together to take forward an asset transfer. It's actually pretty common because the majority of buildings that go to asset transfer are used and occupied by lots of groups. Mm-hmm. And there's also a requirement for the 2-tier scale that we always promote to have 20 trustees. And those trustees are genuinely representatives of all the subgroups. Mm-hmm. But generally you always have either one body or one organisation takes the lead.
Okay, so, and I think going back to what Councillor Colley said, in terms of the distinction that you're kind of making there, in terms of the ownership, so the CAT is the ownership of the building, but quite often there might have been maybe not a full CAT application, but interest expressed under the process, but ultimately it wasn't maybe compatible for constitutions to come together or the usage, and that's where potentially a group has been the one who's ended up doing the ownership, but that hasn't precluded the other groups from being part of the operational management. Is that what you're saying, basically?
Convener, yeah, that is correct. It's a really good observation from Councillor Murtagh there that we've seen many groups who have expressed an interest and then decided it's maybe not for them, but have then been really supportive of other groups who have taken the lead and still continue to occupy facilities. The Lauriston one's a good example. The Inshira Pavilion's another one. There's a whole list of them that we could highlight. You know, Bonnie Bridge Community Centre, our largest community centre, has multiple groups supporting the hub there.
Okay, so, and you characterise that as being pretty common, as if it's almost the norm. In this case, what you're saying is it's because we have 2 applications that have continued to progress almost simultaneously with no convergence, no opportunity. And that's the thing that you're characterising as not happening before. Okay,
that's a fair observation.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Spears.
Convergence and opportunity. There has been convergence and opportunity. I believe we paid £3,150 for mediation to a mediator. But what I want to ask is about if this goes forward and a decision is made today, and it then goes forward to the appeals procedure, will we be able to place conditions regarding the hall at that particular juncture?
Convener, the standard decision notice that we issue will contain conditions in relation to things such as the enablement fund, if there is burdens associated with the property, that it will contain those conditions because we convey our ownership rights. As I think Councillor Redmond mentioned, could we install other conditions on those? The answer is technically yes, but they have to be fair, proportionate, reasonable, and things like that, and reflect the nature of the property and the nature of the transfer. However, all of those conditions can then be subject to review. A group may say we don't believe in those conditions, we then want them to be reviewed, because ultimately you can ask for a review of the decision that's made, whether positively or negatively. to reject an application. So the short answer is yes, we can apply conditions. The second part of the answer is no matter what we do, it can always be subject to review by the council's community asset transfer review group or review body, which would be made up of elected members not based within this executive. And then even beyond that, if the decision was made to reinforce the council executive's decision, it can still then be further appealed to the Scottish Government.
I think the concern is if it's ownership, there might be change of use sometime in the future, and obviously being a community-minded councillor, I would want to see it for the best interest of the community.
Convener, as part of the conditions that we do impose, it is that community use. Can they be challenged and can they be overcome? The short answer is yes, but it is a very complex area of law to do it, and I would suggest that we're probably in a fairly strong position in terms of that. We also include clawback provisions to prevent that for a period of 10 years, where the council can step in.
Councillor Sinclair.
Thank you, Convener. The information the officers received on the 11th of August, first question, could that be considered, given the fact that it's not part of either of the applications right now, could that be under consideration as a new application?
Councillor Sinclair raises a good point. The short answer is no, it's not been validated as an application, and it would have to go through that process of validation, public notification, consultation, and that whole process before it could then be validated. So there's quite a long way to go before that proposal could be considered, and it would need both parties to agree that was their application. But again, applications don't come from both parties. Applications come from a single entity, which would be the asset transfer body. Yeah,
that leads me on to my next question, which is related to that. So, any application coming forward for that type, for the proposal that's been put forward on the 11th of August, would require a new group to be set up to take that forward as the body, the CAT body.
Convener, I would need to check with colleagues in legal as to whether that would be possible to be two bodies making an asset transfer application as a single entity. I think the easiest way to get through the asset transfer process, the evaluation and the validation process, would be for them to come together as a single body. I think it gives much more clearer governance, much more clearer responsibilities. In terms of transfer of ownership, for instance, it would be easier because there'd be clear roles, responsibilities and rights being conveyed. I think it would be really difficult for two groups to come together on that basis. But I would convey to much more learned legal colleagues on that.
Thank you, Convener. And once again, I would be inclined to agree with Mr. Kettrick's assessment of that. Just looking at the Act, it contemplates an application by a single community transfer body and doesn't appear to envisage multiple bodies applying in relation to the same property.
Okay, so following on from that, what I'm hearing from officers is that any consideration of that information would take a considerable period of time. Any potential solution to what's being proposed at the moment would require potentially a singular body to be identified, whether one of the existing groups or a conglomerate of both, which again would take a considerable period of time. Perhaps this is a question for Mr. Moody. In terms of the gift that is open to executives today is to consider an extension period beyond the 16th of August deadline. If one group, considering both applications as it stands are both validated, are both considered to be strong, and in terms of the point scoring system, it could be argued that it's a marginal points
between the two applications. If one group were not to agree, given that both groups are here and the constitution of both groups would need to determine whether or not both groups here, both representatives of both groups here today could consider that option and agree to it. If one group were not to agree and it went to non-determination, what would that mean for the whole process and for the group that did agree?
It's a good question, and it's one where we've tried to work through some of the scenarios in that. I think it's not one that the Act has easily envisaged when you read through the various appeal and review provisions for it. In my view, if one group didn't agree and we ended up in a non-determination situation, and that group whose application had not been determined requested a review, there's no doubt that that application would proceed to the review body for it to be considered. And in my view, the consequences of that, because of necessity, the review body would need to consider that application in comparison with the other, would be that that would suspend consideration at the executive of the application the community transfer body which had made it had agreed to the extension. So I think in essence it would end consideration at the executive and move the matter to the community transfer body, to the community asset transfer review body, at least until that had been determined.
Okay, and I think my final question on this is that if any agreement that's reached today, any agreement that then could potentially be reviewed if either of the groups ask for that review, any decision at the review panel, can that be appealed? Where is it appealed to, and what is the process for that?
It can be appealed to the Scottish ministers.
In a similar vein to for example, planning application.
As I understand it, the process would be that a reporter would be appointed to consider the appeal.
Okay, thanks, Convener.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't know whether or not we would want to take another short recess in order to just give a bit of contemplation time. Okay, 5 minutes, we'll come back. Okay, thank you. Just wanted to give people an opportunity to see if there's anything that they maybe want to bring forward by way of a proposal.
Thank you, convener. I have a motion that I would like to propose. I think governance officers have it, and I'm happy for them to circulate it. Is that okay?
Yeah.
The motion is that executive should agree to extend the period for determination for both applications by 3 months, subject to agreement by both groups. Agree that the matter be continued for a period of 3 months to allow officers and any external mediators as required to further explore the scope for a single application to be made on the basis of a joint governance arrangement. Agree that the Director of Police Services shall have authority to agree a further extension of the period for determination of both applications. I'm happy to speak to it now if people want me to, or I'll take your advice.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Hannah. Councillor Bundy?
It was a point of clarification. I agree with the spirit of the motion that's been put forward, but in the questioning I mentioned about the mediation not being public and the content of the mediation being private. Is there a way that we can explore if the content of the mediation can be public?
Can I maybe just say I did not add that into the motion for the simple reason that we got the answer to that earlier on from officers. I don't think we can dictate that it should be public, but officers have heard our concerns about it not being public, and I would trust them to take that away and consider it.
Okay, thank you for that. I've got Councillor Murtagh.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, convener. I suppose I have some questions on the implications of the motion that we've just seen. I suppose in terms of the executive's wish to agree to extend the period for determination for both applications, that might be your wish, but would it compel in any way either or both groups to do so? I think you've already kind of answered that there are implications and risk should neither do so, but can you clarify them and really, what the process would be, considering I don't see that there's a process to ask both groups today in this quasi-judicial meeting to agree to that. So if either one or neither agree tomorrow, and within that time frame, are we basically just going to end up having to go to appeal?
Well, taking those maybe one by one, there's no compulsion, or if this were agreed to be the executive's position on the matter, on either of the groups to agree to the extension of time. That's a matter for them. It's a question of agreement. And as framed in the motion that you have before you that has been moved, the executive's agreement to extend on both applications is subject to the agreement of both parties. So if one of the parties were to come back to us and say, no, we don't want to do that, we feel we're entitled to have the matter determined within the period, which would be an entirely reasonable position for them to take, then the extension would fall. And we would be in a situation of non-determination, and the matter could then proceed to the Community Asset Transfer Review Committee if one or both of the current applicants decided to request a review, which would be their right. And I also, maybe just to finish the point, agree with Councillor Murtaugh's point that I don't think it would be appropriate to seek that agreement during the course of the meeting just now. It should be done subsequent to the meeting.
So, and I think that last point is important. And what I'm picking up from that is effectively there's nothing that would be able to give us the confidence as an executive today that if we agreed this motion, that it would be that it wouldn't, no matter what is said, no matter whether nodding is happening or anything like that, no matter what is said, that is purely a wish that's being expressed, and there's no part of this process in which we can ask, is that okay? That wouldn't be part of the quasi-judicial process that we've got before us.
That's correct.
Okay, Councillor Spears.
Okay, I put forward a motion and gave it to the committee services. Can you enlighten us on what's happening with that? Is that going to be handed out as well?
Thank you, Convener. And I think Councillor Spears is referring to the point he was making earlier on, and he has helpfully reduced the motion which he referred to writing, and it's maybe worth just reading that to the members of the executive, which is that Council lets a local ballot take place regarding this matter to ensure that this is a community decision regarding the committee that will run and operate Thornhill Community Centre for the benefit of the community. And one of the questions I think which Councillor Spears had raised in relation to that was this legally competent? So I think I'm able to offer advice to the executive on that matter, which is it's not legally competent to do so. And I'm referring in that to the terms of the Act itself, which makes it clear that the authority must decide whether to agree or refuse the request. We can't outsource the decision making on a quasi-judicial matter of this nature to the community in the nature of a ballot. So that's the fundamental point which prevents it being a competent motion. There are also the practical questions of what would the ballot consist of, who would the electorate be, how would it be run, and who would pay for that. But the fundamental point is it's for the committee to make the determination, not the community in the form of a ballot.
Okay, thank you for that. Is there anyone willing to second? Councillor Redmond?
Yeah, I'm happy to second and reserve the right.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sinclair?
Thanks, Convener. This is an incredibly challenging decision that's in front of us today. It's been made no easier today than what it was back in June when we first considered these applications. Through questioning earlier on, I think I'm content with what officers kind of gave to me, that in agreeing to extend this by whatever period of time we want to, while it's in the gift of executive to agree that here we are not in control of that decision. I personally don't see any value in moving to extend this for those risks as set out earlier on. This is challenging for a number of reasons for me. This is, and as I mentioned back in June, it is regrettable that neither of the two groups can come together to move forward. There's been no agreement on that. And while I appreciate the commentary that no agreement doesn't mean no offer, ultimately there is still no agreement. This is a community centre and a community hall that I have a long history with. I don't know how many times I've been in that hall prior to being a councillor at community events and including being a councillor, because it sits within my ward. It's a great wee centre. It's got so many different uses and so many different groups and people coming along to use it, and it is the epitome of a very vibrant and thriving community hall. It would be devastating to see anything happen to it that meant that would have a detrimental impact on the community. My thoughts on this right now, and as much as it pains me to see it, we have 2 applications in front of us that we need to determine right now. Both applications are considered to be strong, and as I mentioned earlier on in questioning, there is one application that's marginally above where the other application is. That's what we have to decide on today. There is nothing to suggest, nothing has been put forward in these applications in front of us to suggest that shared ownership, shared management is something that is not just people are willing to happen, but that it's actually achievable. Everything that I've heard, everything that I've been privy to in public, and the public commentary that's been played out, would suggest to me that that's not possible. So in terms of the motion, I can't agree with that today. If I could present an alternative to that, convener, right now, perhaps an amendment, if that's the case, to agree the officer's recommendations. I think the only way that we can move forward with this in any way, shape or form is to actually make a decision today. We are elected here to make decisions, and delaying any further decision, we're not really making a decision. We're actually saying it maybe could be somebody else that makes a decision here because it's not within our control. So with that, I would move the officer's recommendations. As much as it pains me to suggest that there is one overall winner and one overall loser, the nature of these decisions that are before us today necessitates that conclusion being drawn. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Sinclair. Councillor Murtagh.
Yeah, in a very similar vein, sentiment and logic, I agree with Councillor Sinclair and will be. I'm not going to say happy to second the recommendations because that's not the right expression, but I will second the recommendation, of the officer's recommendations and Councillor Sinclair's amendment. And it comes down to, this is a quasi-judicial process and we have to go through the logical steps and the legal implications of each step in turn. We've been presented with 2 proposals, both of which are good proposals, competent proposals, and strong proposals. We've heard that, and either one could be capable of making a successful venture, and I have no doubt of that. But we cannot, there is no way of not determining this without risk to the council. And it's not just without risk to the council. We've heard that not determining it will also have risk to the communities and their continuing operation within the hall, regardless of who might take that over. So I do think that we do have to make a decision. I think we've heard the evidence of the work that officers done, not just over the summer, but over an extended period, and that every effort has been made in order to bring parties together. And I say this from a point of view of a trustee of a charity who has also looked at doing asset transfers. It's not as simple as just coming together and agreeing with other parties when you have constitutions and difficulties. And we're not talking about a management agreement here, we're talking about ownership. It's not, a lot of the time, it's not because of will or because of any kind of, malice or bad intent. Sometimes you just can't take on a legal agreement that binds you to ownership and all the responsibilities that come with that easily. And I think it's important to reflect that. So I think that we could determine, we could say, let's give it another 3 months, let's give it another 6 months. I don't realistically, from what I've heard, think that there's going to be any prospect of changing the outcome. I wish that was not the case, but that is my view. And I think we owe it to make a decision today, and we can only go on the balance within the report. And that is very narrow. But ultimately, that's the evidence that's before us. And I can't see any other alternative that doesn't present significant risk to the council and to the communities than agreeing the officer's recommendations.
Okay, just before we move into the debate itself, I'm going to just ask Colin to come in because we've agreed it's a procedural motion.
Just been reflecting as the debate has continued that the nature of Councillor Hannah's motion, I think, is a procedural motion. So our standing orders do require that that's dealt with separately as a for or against before we actually decide the substance of the issue. So the motion has been circulated, it's been moved and seconded, and the vote is for or against. And the for would be to seek the continuation for 3 months, and the against would be to proceed into decision making. Councillor Meikle-John.
For.
Councillor Aitken.
For.
Councillor Bundy.
For.
Councillor Colley.
Against.
Councillor Deacon.
Against.
Councillor Devine.
Against.
Councillor Garner.
Against.
Councillor Hannah.
For.
Bailey Kerr.
For.
Councillor Murtagh. Councillor Patterson.
For.
Councillor Redmond.
For.
Councillor Sinclair.
Against.
And Councillor Spears.
For.
There were 8 votes for the motion. There were 6 votes against. The motion is carried, and that ends the proceedings for today.